Women are going to control 2/3 of the nation's wealth by 2030, which is 30 trillion with a T, not billion, not million, trillion. So this industry, our industry, my industry that I love, has got to change to make it more female friendly. And there's a million things that they can do to make it more female friendly, but they just really haven't done it yet. Now, I'm not saying that the whole industry is, wrong, because there's a lot of great advisors out there serving women well.
Hi there. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Leah Alter.
And I'm Joanna Arisman.
And this is WomenShare, a celebration of women in financial services.
Well, today we are so happy to welcome Cary Carbonaro, a managing wealth advisor with Ashton Thomas Private Wealth, to the show. Like many of the women we have here on WomenShare, Cary's role as an advisor is only one part of her story. She's also a Women in Wealth ambassador at Ashton Thomas and has held leadership roles at firms like ACM Wealth, Goldman Sachs, and United Capital. She's a CFP Board ambassador and is an author of 2 books focused on financial education for women. Cary has also spoken around the world on financial literacy with a focus on advocating for women and guiding them to financial empowerment, which, as you know, we are very much behind here on the show. In addition to all that, Cary makes giving back a priority through her involvement in the Women's Giving Alliance and is part of the Benefactor Circle at the Center for Financial Planning. Cary, with all of that abundant goodness in your life and no doubt in your schedule, we are so grateful that you joined us here today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
We're so excited to dig in.
Yes. So along those lines, there's so much we do want to get into. So let's jump in. First, we'd love to just start with the why behind your story, especially around the financial empowerment for women. Was there a specific kind of point in your life or your career that really propelled you on this journey of being such a passionate advocate for financial education for women?
So such a good question, and I get asked it often. So there's a book called The One Thing, and you look back on your life and you look at the threads in your life, the one thing in your life that's always been a constant. And I didn't realize probably till I was 50 that my one thing was always helping women my entire life, starting from teaching dance when I was in like my younger years, when I was in school, to starting and founding a sorority when I was in college for women, to graduating from college and trying to help women in finance in the bank, to starting my own practice and wanting to help women with finances in financial planning, to then unfortunately marrying an abusive man and then winding up in an abusive marriage and then being taken advantage of. And then it completely ignited my on fire to have this not happen to any other woman that if I could help it in my lifetime. So it's a big, long story, and that's my answer. And yes, so it is my life's work to help women become financially free, make their own choices, not ever having to rely on a man, and be financially independent.
Wow. That is, that was a lot in a little. That is incredible. I'm just floored, and also just so inspired that this was something that you knew even as a young girl, young woman, that you wanted to do. That's very inspiring. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people don't know until much later in life what that thread is,
Yes.
So I'm imagining people get to hear a lot more about this in some of your writings. And This April, your latest book, Women in Wealth, A Playbook to Empower Clients and Unlock Their Fortune, is being released. That's so exciting. Yes. In it, you speak to other advisors about serving women clients, which we love. We talk about it a lot here on the show. So we would love to hear some of maybe the key misconceptions around working with women that you addressed in the book and that you're passionate about.
Sure. Well, so unfortunately, the industry was set up by men for men. And I'm sure you've heard that many times, right? And unfortunately, women have been an afterthought. They're not marketed to, they're not spoken to, they're not communicated correctly, they're not addressed, they're not even part of the client experience process in most cases. So pretty much the industry is really doing everything wrong when it comes to females. And the best stat that shows that is that women leave their advisors when their husband dies 70 to 90% of the time. So that number has not changed. As a matter of fact, it depends who you ask, if it's 70 or 90 and somewhere in the middle. But that number has not changed since they've been recording that. So,
really? Okay, because I was wondering, I feel like,
wow.
I'm like, the fact that that still holds true honestly floors me, even though we do the show and talk about this all the time, but I'm just still stunned.
Right.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. It's unbelievable. And so what is so interesting and why it's such a great time for this book is we have a wealth management wave coming. It's not a shift, it's a wave. McKinsey calls it a wave. So, women are going to control 2/3 of the nation's wealth by 2030, which is 30 trillion with a T, not billion, not million, trillion. So this industry, our industry, my industry that I love, has got to change to make it more female friendly. And there's a million things that they can do to make it more female friendly, but they just really haven't done it yet. Now, I'm not saying that the whole industry is, wrong, because there's a lot of great advisors out there serving women well. I just want everybody to be doing it and serving women well. And, it's interesting. I just actually got off a call with high wage earners, and they said, we didn't find an advisor till our 50s, and we don't even really like the person that much. But because it's so hard to find good advisors who hear them, listen to them, see them, have empathy, and men are afraid that a woman is going to cry at their desk. And guess what? If you ask them the right question, they will cry. And guess what? That is what they want to do. And that means you're building trust and rapport with them, but they're freaked out by the whole emotional side of planning. And so that's one of the things that has to change. One of the million.
Yeah. Well, and, we talk a lot about on the show, right? And even our mission in, creating this podcast, this platform, is what we can do individually, right? To be able to help move things forward, right? Because if you look at it from, 1,000-foot view, it seems like a lot. Like, to your point, there's still a lot to do. So being able to hone in on sort of your involvement and what you as an individual in your community or within your organization to help that, it becomes much more doable and ultimately powerful.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's interesting because in the book, there's a couple of there's so many chapters, there's 23 chapters. And, some of the things that people don't even realize are like the unconscious bias and implicit bias that exists in the world, that you don't even know what you don't know. It's an absolute blind spot that you are either ignoring the woman or making her feel uncomfortable or just not addressing her needs. And it's happening constantly over and over and over. So I've got a bunch of case studies, and I even have a test to take to see where you are in that range. I also have a fantastic quiz, which Kathleen Kingsbury let me borrow. And it is how female friendly is your practice. And it goes through 20 questions to see where you are in the world. And, you could think that you're doing everything right, and there's things that you don't know what you don't know. So that's what I'm trying to expose.
Well, and we got the sneak peek at some of the chapter titles, and there's one I'm just dying to ask you about. It mentions bro culture in this industry. So can you just touch a little bit on what that chapter is all about?
Sure. Well, it's actually called Bro Culture and Lawsuits.
Oh,
yes. So I break down the most famous lawsuits in the profession, in the big the big ones and how much money they lost in this lawsuit and what was happened and what was the outcome, and all that's public knowledge, nothing that's behind closed doors. But it's interesting that my two favorite ones are the Boom Boom Room, which took place on Long Island for Morgan Stanley in the 90s. So it's where I grew up, and so like that one is like really interesting to me. And then the other one was the Goldman Sachs one. And since I worked there, but not by choice, but by acquisition, that one was for all women who were producers who got stuck at VP level because they couldn't move to the next level because of the culture against them at Morgan Stanley, at Goldman Sachs, sorry. And that one, it was a class action lawsuit. It was settled out of court, and ironically, each woman got $50,000 for not being able to move up to the next level, which is pretty much like their monthly pay, 1 month
like
of pay
nothing.
for being held down for your entire career. So,
Right.
I mean, it's so wrong in so many ways. So I wrote my opinion on what I thought about that lawsuit. And I actually was in that lawsuit, and I thought I was going to get the 50,000 and I was going to give it to, I was going to donate to a women's organization. I wasn't, because that's what I wanted to do with it. And I actually got notified, it's in my book, but I did get notified. United Capital employees were excluded from the lawsuit. And I said, I was the only one. And they said, well, you're getting nothing. And I said, thank you. What would I expect? Anything different? So that was my experience.
I think also what's interesting about bro culture in this industry is that the bros think that they are safe by being a part of it. And I have seen that play out over and over and over again, where that has not been the case. And when that higher up, whoever that may be, is done with you, whether you're a man or a woman, they don't really care. Like that boys club thing only goes so far. It doesn't actually protect anybody, from what I have seen in my experience.
Well, and it's interesting because I am so far away from it, like not in it, that like I remember, I think I wrote this in one of my books, that I was like in my 40s and I was at a TD Ameritrade or one of those big trade conferences. And I was like, I looked up and the line for the men's room was out the door. And there was literally not one person except for me and one other woman in the women's room. And I'm like, it's always the reverse, where the line for the women's room is
in life,
out the
every
door.
other area.
Right. And I'm like, what is happening here? And I like a light bulb went off and I was like, where the heck are all the women? And I literally did not even realize it. Here I am 20 years into the industry and I'm like, there's no women. Like, where was I that I didn't even realize that? I mean, other than being in an abusive marriage, but that's another story for another day.
Well, and that actually leads into the next question of like, we all know the facts of, what percentage of leadership roles. It sounds like the higher up you go, the fewer women there are. So curious to hear, as you've had these leadership roles throughout your career, have you experienced that disparity? And how does that influence how you show up now?
So it's a really difficult question because it's interesting because I've always felt that being a woman in this industry is a strength. And that's how I've always been. So I've taken my being a female and used it for good in this industry. So I've used it to attract female clients. I've used it to give a female perspective. And because I have a strong personality and I'm a very New Yorker. So I'm like kind of an in your face person. It's intimidating to some, but in other ways, men kind of like it and respect it. So I've always had a voice at the table. And it's funny, even at United Capital, there was a time where they didn't have a lot of females on the advisor council. And then when they said that they were going to replace me, I said, you're going to replace me with somebody just as strong, right? And then they never replaced me. I stayed on for the whole rest of my time till United Capital got sold to Goldman. So I thought that, so I don't know. I mean, I feel like a woman is a strength in this industry. I don't feel like it's a weakness.
Yeah. Well, no, not necessarily a weakness, but aside from the, conference where you're like, wait a minute, the women's line is shorter. It sounds like it hasn't really been, maybe barrier is the wrong word, but hasn't been something that has affected your career thus far of being like, I'm the only woman in the room, or, whatever it may be.
So the only time it negatively impacted my career was when we were sold to Goldman Sachs. It was the first time in my career that I was openly discriminated against. And it was really, really difficult time in my life. Like, I write about it in the book, in my story. And I talk about, the 2 terrible times in my life of overcoming, horrible things in my life. And one was being in an abusive marriage, and one was being at Goldman Sachs. And it's very similar. And I felt the exact same way in both situations.
I think you're seeing us nod our heads because we've both, in our previous corporate situations, have felt that very much, where there's something just toxic about the environment. And that is very relatable. And we've heard a lot of stories from a lot of women who have felt very similar. And it's not one organization or one part of the industry. Right. People from all over the industry, all different ages, what their roles are, experience that. Yeah, it's nice that we're all kind of working to change that. And to that point, I know the CFP board and your work with them, they are very much dedicated and focused on the efforts of women, bringing more women into the industry, getting more women certified. So we'd love to hear about your work as an ambassador and the work in general with the CFP board on, building that stronger future.
Sure. So, I am I've been a CFP for 20 years, and I've been a CFP board ambassador for a decade. I think I am the most senior ambassador because, as far as length of time doing it. And so that role, I actually represent the profession in the media. So that, and it's interesting because when I first became an ambassador, there was 40,000 CFPs. And now there's 100,000 CFPs. So is that an unbelievable amount of growth? I mean, really incredible. And then one of the things that the CFP board did, on top of all the other things that they do, is they created the Center for Financial Planning. And so that is the nonprofit arm of the CFP board that is focused on diversity, inclusion, next gen, all of that stuff. But for me, that's my space that's where I donate money to bring more women into the profession, and so that is why I am a strategic donor for them. And I'm actually also on the board for fundraising for them as well. And so one of the campaigns that they did was, you have to see it to be it. And I love that one because, so they had African Americans, Latinas, women, and just holding them out as, you can do this too. And then also going after the great ads for the younger generation in school, targeting the kids in school. And then the other fantastic thing I did with them, which I wish we would still doing it, but we did it. We went to the Girl Scouts International Conference in Orlando 2 years ago. And we had an incredible booth with a game about retiring and teaching them about being a CFP. And we had these fantastic future CFP tattoos and selfie sticks saying future CFP. And these girls are aged 5 through 18. None of them knew what a CFP was. Not one of them in there. And then, we're talking about, about what it is and even how much money you make. And the girls are like, what? Like, because everybody knows what an attorney is. Everybody knows what a CPA is, or at least, they sort of know what it is. But, it's just not something that girls are taught. Like, you could be a CFP. What is that? We don't even know what that is. So we planted a lot of seeds.
Yes.
That's great. Yeah, because I mean, I didn't know anything about this industry literally until I got into it. And that's the reason I was excited about being in this industry, because there's so much to learn. It's such a deep and wide knowledge base about investing and money, and there's just so much to learn. I thought, oh, this is exciting. Like, I could be in this industry for a really long time and not know it all. And that is really, I think, if you are if a young girl is into learning, and that is something that really fires them up, this industry is so good for that.
It is.
It's an infinity amount of information to absorb.
Yes, it is. It is. But the only problem is one of the issues is that there's not that many of us in it doing it and staying in it, women. So, we're only 20% of the CFPs. I know it's climbing. It's maybe 23.9. So, but it has, it's moving in little tiny baby fractions, but it is moving. But the other issue is, out of those 24, I'm rounding up, not everybody is rainmakers. So you've got support staff, you've got back office, you've got client services, you've got, teaching. So the ones who make the real money in this industry are people like myself, who are rainmakers, who go out and get the clients, or who are the lead advisors, or who own the firm. And that's another thing, actually, we were talking about earlier with the bro culture. I kind of isolated myself a little bit from it, in the sense of being my own practice, having my own RIA, affiliating with, a female friendly firm, or, something like that, versus working at a Goldman Sachs, which, I never really chose to work there. I just got acquired.
Yeah. But that topic has come up of, like, not necessarily forced entrepreneurship in your case, but like, that was a very intentional choice to build your own practice, probably for a number of reasons, but having a healthy culture was probably right up there after having experienced the opposite.
Right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we could keep going, and I could ask you so many questions, but okay. Time for one of our favorite.
We might need a part 2 of you.
Cary Carbonaro quarterly. No, okay. So, what is the best career advice you've ever received?
So my dad was in finance, and I kind of followed in his footsteps, and he really instilled in me at a very young age that, you can be anything you want to be. Like, he literally said, if you want to be president, you could be president. And so he never put limits on me. And so I didn't even know, like, limits existed. So I never put limits on myself.
Yay, Dad.
We need more of us to be raised that way.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking a lot lately about confidence and, learning how to make those big leaps of faith and trust ourselves, and, build that confidence as we go. And I think a lot of women would really benefit from a dad like that.
Yes, exactly. And I actually have a whole thing in my book, on a whole chapter on confidence, and what happens with girls and confidence. And it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as you know, we are a celebration of women in the industry. And so we like to celebrate our guests on every episode. So outside of an amazing career and business that you've got going on, what can we celebrate with you today?
I guess the launch of my new book, which is coming out April 29th, 2025, published by Wiley.
Awesome. Yeah,
well, and a huge accomplishment. Yes.
Thank you.
I know. I'm dying to see in detail some of these chapters, because I think it's such an interesting mix of advocating for women in the industry and the women clients that we serve. So,
right. It's both.
It's both. Yes. And there's such a strong relationship between the two, right?
Yes, there really is.
Absolutely.
If we can bring more women in the profession, then we're going to have more women clients, but we're going to have more women clients anyway. So we might as well get ready for it.
Get ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Cary, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you on behalf of our listeners for sharing your story. This has just been amazing. If someone wants to get in touch with you or follow what you're up to, what's the best way for them to find you?
Any social media. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I'm on X, but not really that much. But yeah, totally connect with me on social media. I love to meet you.
Excellent. And what's the best way? Can somebody pre-order the book?
Yes, they can. You can pre-order it. Actually, if you go to my website, carycarbonaro.com, and you click on books, there's I think about 10 retailers there. You can just click on the link and pre-order it from any of them.
Perfect. And we will have all those links right here in the show notes. So if you want to find Cary, we're going to make it real easy for you.
Great.
Yeah. Well, that is our show for today. Thank you again, Cary, so much for coming on. If ours is a mission that you want to share in, please subscribe to the show wherever you love to get your podcasts. And with that, I'm Leah Alter.
And I'm Joanna Erisman, and we'll catch you on the next episode of WomenShare.